Up front, Wisconsin's 2012 U.S. Senate race. Who's in, who's out in a wide open field? And will this race be more difficult than some candidates think?
Tommy Thompson would have to win a Republican primary in today's modern GOT party.
I would love to see Tammy Baldwin run. That would be fantastic. The woman who is so far left that she brought Nancy Pelosi to Dane County.
Then the budget impasse on Capitol Hill. Senator Ron Johnson on whether Republicans and Democrats can ever find their way to a deal.
This administration is making a concerted effort to scare the public about the debt ceiling.
It's all this week on Up Front.
Honest, candid, insightful. This is Up Front with Mike Gousha.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Up Front. We begin today with Wisconsin's 2012 U.S. Senate race and the jockeying that began soon after Democratic Senator Herb Kohl announced his retirement. The Republican side of the ticket was Paul Ryan's if he wanted it. But the Janesville congressman said last week that he'll stay put in the House. Former Republican Governor Tommy Thompson immediately started to send signals that he will run. Former Congressman Mark Newman says he's interested. So are Assembly Speaker Jeff Fitzgerald and his brother, Senate Majority Leader Scot, and former State Senator Ted Canavas. On the Democratic side, a lot of the party faithful seem to be pinning their hopes on former Senator Russ Feingold, whose intentions are still unknown. Congressional Representatives Tammy Baldwin and Ron Kind are also thinking about it. So, who is likely to get in? What challenges will they face? And is there a dark horse candidate out there? They were asking two campaign veterans. Brian Fraley is now with the conservative-leaning think tank, the MacIver Institute, and Scott Ross is with the liberal advocacy group, One Wisconsin Now. Thanks to both of you for being back on the program today.
My pleasure.
We're going to begin, since it's the Republican convention weekend, we'll begin with you, Brian Fraley, and we'll talk about Tommy G. Thompson and his intentions. On Friday, Governor Bobby Jindal from Louisiana said, I'm excited that Tommy Thompson is running for the U.S. Senate. Is there any doubt he's running?
I think until he officially announces and the confetti cannons are pulled, there's going to be doubt. There's been some false starts in the past with some of the races that he's toyed with. So I think until he pulls the trigger, I think there is some doubt. Now, once he does, though, he's the front runner, without a doubt, just based on his in the Republican primary at the very least, based on his electoral success and his longstanding position as the head of the party.
Scott Ross, you're on record as saying you don't think he will run.
I don't, because,
why not?
Well, I think Tommy Thompson would have to win a Republican primary in today's modern GOT party. And this is a guy who, when he was the governor, increased the state budget by over 100%. He helped, as a member of the Bush administration, to pass the largest unfunded mandate, $8 trillion for the Medicare Part D plan. And on top of that, he was an early supporter of the President's Federal Health Reform Act. And that's a real problem because, you know, it's 2011 going into 2012. This isn't the 90s. I mean, we're talking, Tommy Thompson is definitely the Brett Favre of Wisconsin politics in that, he hasn't won a big game since the 90s. And we talk about his comebacks every year.
I never thought I would hear this. You won't hear this. I was going to say, I never thought I would hear the day when Scott Ross would agree, almost word for word, with a group like the Club for Growth, the business group, which sent out a scathing press release this week about Tommy Thompson, talking about him raising taxes as governor, supporting Obamacare. Now he wants to run for the U.S. Senate. April Fool's Day has passed. They called him a big government, pro-tax Republican whose time has come and gone. Now, I know the local folks said, no, we're not buying into that. But doesn't that touch on some of what Tommy Thompson could face if he decides to run?
Huge hurdles, absolutely. Absolutely.
There are people in the party that feel this way.
There are a great number of people in the party that feel that way. And Tommy's challenge will be to convince them, look, when I was in charge, people were working. When I was in charge, people were better. My idea is, anyone can talk conservative and say that I'm for this or whatever, but in the end what I do is create an atmosphere where people get to work and people have jobs. That's going to be his challenge, and his challenge is also going to be to run in a modern political campaign. He's never had to run in the age of Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and the social media that really drives political communication these days. I actually think the latter is going to be his bigger challenge than any kind of center-right conundrum.
Is he? I know you say you don't think he'll run, but isn't he? Doesn't he present problems for Democrats, Scott Ross? I mean, He does have the household name that everybody knows, Tommy Thompson. They do think back more fondly on some days gone by. Doesn't that present problems for Democrats?
Well, I think the question is whether or not Tommy Thompson could get out of a statewide primary.
He'd win a primary.
I don't think that he can win a statewide primary in which there is a competitive alternative. Okay. And one of the biggest things about this race is what's not in the race, and that's Paul Ryan and his Medicare plan. His plan to privatize Medicare, his plan to cut 44 million people off of Medicaid, raising taxes on the middle class to pay for tax cuts for rich and corporations. Every Republican out there who runs for the U.S. Senate seat is going to be asked that question. Do you support Paul Ryan's plan or you don't? And we see, I believe, the reason that Paul Ryan didn't run is because he's afraid of defending that plan, a plan that 80% of the people are opposed to.
Well, let's talk about a potential primary in the Republican side. If Tommy Thompson runs, who's he likely to face? Who's likely to get in, even though he might run?
Taking the most aggressive steps right now is Ted Canvass, former state senator from Waukesha County. He was looking at this before Cole's announcement, and I know that his intention going to the convention this weekend was to solicit the opinion of the delegates and really feel them out and hear if they think that someone with private sector experience in computer software and the public sector experience as a state legislator, if that's something in the mix they want. Mark Newman's talked about it, but I don't know how Newman makes that leap after 2 years ago when everyone said, please run, before Ron Johnson made his announcement, please run, we need a candidate against Russ Feingold. And he said, I don't want to run for U.S. Senate. The budget problems there, I think, are beyond our control. That's going to be tough for him. And then the Fitzgeralds, I think either one of them will take a serious look at this. These seats like this come up once a political generation.
Let me move over to the Democratic side, Scott Ross. Are Democrats just waiting for Russ Feingold to make up his mind?
I think that the Democrats will have a slew of really good candidates to pick from. Such as Congressman Ron Kind, Representative Tammy Baldwin, certainly former Senator Feingold, are all formidable candidates who are on the right side of the values of the people of Wisconsin, all of whom have a proven track record in bringing success to the people of Wisconsin. And so I think that's, whereas on the conservative side, outside of Tommy Thompson, you've got a basic journalism lesson. Ted Canvass, who? Fitzgerald, which? And Mark Newman, why? And so I think that that's the real challenge, that they're the ones that have challenge. Democrats, in this case, have an embarrassment of riches. People who are standing up for the people of Wisconsin.
But those people that you mentioned, Tammy Baldwin, Ron Kind, aren't they waiting for Russ Feingold? They're not going to get in if they think he's going to run.
That I don't know about. I mean, again, we'll have to see how things play out. I think each one of them are putting out certain signals that say they're certainly interested in looking and what's best going to move the state of Wisconsin forward, who best represents our values of job creation, of fair taxation, of health care.
So who do Republicans want to see?
Well,
emerge as the Democratic candidate.
He said they have an embarrassment of riches in the Democratic Party. He's half right. I would love to see Tammy Baldwin run. That would be fantastic. The woman who is so far left that she brought Nancy Pelosi to Dane County at a public event just this week. Yeah. So that would be fantastic. Or talk of Joanne Kloppenberg or Peg Lautenschlager or Kathleen Falk. Those would be great. Look, Feingold is the same on their side as Ryan would have been for us, would have cleared the field. Just because of the competitive races that he's been in and the kind of icon status within the party. As long as he's in limbo, that their side is in limbo. If he decides no, it will be a free-for-all on their side, much like it will be a very competitive race on the Republicans.
What about a dark horse candidate? Last year at this time, we were sitting around and Republicans were scratching their head about who was going to run for the U.S. Senate, and Ron Johnson emerges and at the convention is basically anointed as the candidate. Is there somebody who we're not currently talking about? Is there a Tim Sullivan, a Bucyrus executive who has a favorable rating with his unions, a business guy who's out there that we're not talking about who could emerge in something like this?
Well, I'll say this. I think that progressives, Democrats, are united in a way they've never been united before because of Governor Walker's attack on working families. And I don't know that someone, for instance, like Tim Sullivan, good businessman, I don't know that the Democratic primary...
Nobody knows whether he's a Democrat or Republican.
Yeah, and I don't know that the Democratic primary voters are going to vote for a guy who gave Scott Walker a $1,000 contribution last year any more than the Republican voters are going to support a guy who gave Tom Barrett a $1,000 contribution on the same day. And so I think that's
the business guy.
Yeah, so I don't know that there's somebody who's going to come in and buy the Democratic primary, that's for sure.
But the party operatives, the guys who run the Democratic and Republican Party in D.C. would love to see a self-funder come. either party would love to see someone who could come in and take the money aspect out of it. So they will be in play from the top-down nature, but I agree with Scott, you won't hear me say this a lot, that the bottom-up nature of the two parties will benefit more of an experienced campaigner.
Yeah, I think that, in some years, yes, but I think that any candidate who can come in with a real fundraising base of people around the state of Wisconsin, like a Tammy Baldwin, like a Russ Feingold, like a Ron Kind, I think that's a real advantage this year.
I'll write Baldwin a check tonight if she announces.
Excellent.
Scott Ross of One Wisconsin Now, Brian Fraley of the MacIver Institute, thanks very much for your time. And we do want to mention that Scott and Brian appear regularly in a feature called That's Debatable. You can find it on wisopinion.com. And who do Republican Party activists like for U.S. Senate and President in 2012? WisPolitics has been conducting a straw poll at this weekend's GOP convention. You'll find the results at wispolitics.com. What, if anything, can break the budget impasse on Capitol Hill? My interview with Senator Johnson when Up Front continues.